Hey, folks, Tennessee State Senator Bo Watson. Today on Tennessee Today, I had a really good conversation with the Commissioner of the Tennessee Department of Transportation, Will Reid. Will is an engineer by training. You know, most of the time when you talk to engineers, it can be kind of a difficult conversation. He's very conversational. We talked about, one, how expensive roads are to build. We talked about the challenges of building roads, maintaining roads, how we go about deciding where we're going to build roads. But we also talked about bridges. We talked about air transportation, rail transportation. It's a really interesting conversation because our roads and our bridges are a daily conversation amongst our citizens. And understanding how the state is trying to invest in those projects is really important. And I think Will gives us a really good overview of how the Tennessee Department of Transportation goes about maintaining and building our roads all across the state of Tennessee. So I hope you'll take the time to listen and watch. It's a really good podcast. Will does a really good job. And we should be proud of the Tennessee Department of Transportation. They're always ranked in the top 10 for transportation programs across the country. Do you ever wonder what's really going on in government, locally, in the state of Tennessee, and across the country? I'm Tennessee State Senator Bo Watson, and on Tennessee Today, we dive into the issues that shape our communities, from local policy to national debates. Each episode, I break down key topics and issues, share my perspective from over 20 years in the Tennessee legislature, and talk with guests about the decisions that impact your daily life. I hope you enjoy these honest conversations and that they help you stay informed and engaged. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to Tennessee Today wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Welcome to Tennessee Today. Glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited about this opportunity.
Yeah, it'll be fun and interesting. Hopefully we'll talk a lot about the things that people talk to me about, and I also know they talk to you about as well.
Right.
But I think, infrastructure is so important to our state, from just an economical position. But really, people, roads and bridges, it's like the weather. It's a daily conversation, particularly here, locally.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's certainly been my experience, obviously, being the Commissioner of Transportation. But I think when it comes to what are some of the fundamental roles of government, obviously, and I've heard you say this, and I've used it since I heard you say it, people often judge effectiveness of government by the condition of their roads.
It's a wise statement.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I hope you don't mind, but
I
I do credit you with that
Yeah.
when I say it. But I've actually started talking to my own people about that because, I mean, it's very true. It's something that what we do touches all Tennesseans almost daily, not to mention the fact that the people that travel through the state. So whether it's a business concern or a commute concern or a safety concern, I mean, when it comes to infrastructure, we touch that every day.
Yeah. So before we get into all that, because there's plenty of that to talk about, I need to talk to you about like Wilcox Bridge, and I need to talk to you about the project that you just completed, the I-24/75 interchange. That's about a $300 million project that we did. We just this year completed the Appson Pike project and the big bridge that spans the railway there. But before we get into all that kind of stuff and the list of complaints that I have from
constituents,
okay. Just kidding. Tell me a little bit. You're from West Tennessee.
I am. I grew up. I was born in Memphis, but grew up in Bartlett, Tennessee, which is a suburb of Memphis.
Right.
Yep, grew up there. My family is originally from North Mississippi. When you grow up in North Mississippi, the largest city close by to find work is Memphis. So my parents settled there and raised myself and my two sisters there. But yeah, went to Bartlett High School. Went on.
What is Bartlett High School? What's the mascot of Bartlett High School?
It's the Panthers.
The Panthers. Okay.
The Panthers.
I should have known that. I should have known that. Okay,
yeah,
Panthers.
Yeah,
all right.
It's the Panthers of Bartlett. Yeah, they actually were. They were right in the thick of the state high school basketball championship this year. So, anyway, but grew up there. Went to attend the University of Mississippi. Go Rebels for a while, and then
careful, but okay.
Yeah. I'm in the middle of Big Orange country, so I have to. But thankfully, and
and Mock country. This is also UT Chattanooga country.
That's
We're very
true.
sensitive
That's
about
true.
that.
Yeah. But attended Ole Miss for a while, but ended up graduating, transferring and graduating from University of Memphis with a Bachelor of Science degree in civil engineering.
Okay.
Went from there to into the engineering consulting business. Always, when you go to an engineering consultant, they do a lot of things, whether it's private development work, transportation work, water, sewer. I was always kind of drawn to the transportation world. I think part of that is because early in my career as an intern, I spent a lot of time in the field surveying, laying out road projects, bridge projects, cut my teeth doing bridge inspections early on. Worked in that sector for a while. I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to move to Nashville in 2011 with the firm I was with. And shortly after that, got the opportunity to join TDOT, which was not really something that was on my radar until when Governor Haslam came in and Commissioner John Schroer came in. They were looking to add some private sector experience to the department. Really were struggling with a lot of retirements in the department and had lost some of the core competency in the department. We're looking to augment the career staff that was already there, which is great, by the way. Just anybody listening, TDOT has the best staff of any DOT in the nation. I'm convinced of that. I see it every day. Couldn't be prouder to represent those folks. But anyway, had an opportunity to join the department. And I think I did probably the best sales job I've ever done in my life. I convinced my wife that it was a good idea to take a $40,000 a year pay cut.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's an outstanding sales job.
And I gave the whole quality of life speech. Honey, I'm going to go work for the state. It's only 37 and a half hours a week, and it's going to be great. And, I'm doing a public service and all this. And she reminds me now about every Wednesday that 37 and a half hours is up. But no, I'm very fortunate. She's been a big supporter. But all that to say, I always had a desire for public service. I just never, I guess God has a plan for everybody. And it just happened to be that at that time that I got a call from somebody that was working at TDOT that recruited me to come there, and I came in as director of construction in 2014.
And I think one thing about Haslam when he was governor, and Governor Lee has continued this same trend, is they tried to look at some of these bureaucracies within government and streamline them.
Mm-hmm.
And we've done a lot of, and we can get into that. We've done a lot of streamlining around how we build roads and stuff. But they tried to get them, although government can never really be and function like a business because it's not business, it's government. But they wanted to, some of the processes and how we went about doing things, they went out and actively recruited private sector people to come in so that there was a mind shift within how TDOT had been operating. Because I guess when Haslam first came in, it took like 14 years or so to build a road.
Yeah.
And people often wonder, why it takes so long to build a road. When I first got elected, I thought building a road meant, you get a bulldozer, buy some land, go out, flatten it out, put a little crown on it, put some gravel down, put some asphalt on it, and off you go, right?
Yep.
But there's a lot more to building a road than that. But even with the constraints that we have on road building, the department had gotten to where it just took forever to get a project completed, and they just kept stacking up, right?
Yep.
And so I think with Haslam and then, of course, with Lee, we've continued the trend of creating different strategies that allow you guys to do work more quickly.
Yeah, I mean, we've one of the things we've done is we always had good people, and I was one of those when I first came in. I was like, yeah, we're gonna. I was in private sector for 16 years. We're going to run government like a business. And I couldn't agree more with what you said. One of the things I learned was government is not, you can't run it like a business.
We would call it business if it was a business.
If it was business. But to your point, there are things that you can do. There are things that you can do to make it run more efficiently. And one of the things that I recognized was we already had great people. It's, processes in government are built over experiences to address a certain issue that came up at one time or another. The problem is those processes keep growing, that bureaucracy keeps growing, and they never get trimmed back to where they need to be. So that was one of the things that we focused on was efficiency within the department and really training and working with our people to make them better at what they do every day with a business mindset. And they have responded in a big, big way. One of the things that you mentioned 14 years, that's like the national average still today. At TDOT, we've cut that in half. We're at about 7 from planning to job going to construction, which when you consider all the environmental regulation, that's pretty good. Now, there's some of my staff here today, they would tell you I'm still, and they aren't satisfied with that. We still want to be able to deliver quicker, which is one of the reasons why we're consistently have a seat at the table on the national level, because a lot of people don't realize in Tennessee, 50% of our funding is federal. So we're subject to those federal requirements. Most of our big, heavy construction projects have federal funding. So we have to develop them in concert with the federal aid program. And if you think there's bureaucracy at the state level, I'm here to tell you that what's at the federal level can be mind-boggling.
Right. Yeah. No, there's no doubt that you have, and there's a kind of an adage in the business world, particularly in the manufacturing world, that it's rarely about the people. It's always about the process, right? Inefficiency rarely comes from the people. Usually, like you're saying, you got great people working at TDOT, but it's the process that kind of slows everything down. So, and y'all have made great progress in terms of the timeline from start to finish. And some of it's just how you now go about planning and
Right.
that kind of thing. But on a more basic level, for people out there, their number one complaint people often have is potholes.
Mhm.
So how is it that we pave roads on a regular basis and we have potholes?
So, a little bit of, I think it's always important to understand history to know where you are. In the early 2000s, TDOT made a conscious decision to go into what I'm going to call preservation mode of our pavements. Back in the good old days, if you were, I know I probably sound like my parents here, but back in the good old days when we would go do a resurfacing project, we would put not just a lift of surface mix, we would go down and put a couple of inches of structural mix or binder mix whenever we did a resurfacing job. It got to the point where that was cost prohibitive. I mean, costs of everything have gone up. And we made the conscious decision that the main focus is going to keep water out of our pavements. So we went to what we call mill and fill, basically taking 1.25 inches off the top, milling that off and putting it back. When you do that, you seal the water out. You don't put any structure in your pavement. So if the stuff underneath is deteriorating, a pothole, eventually water's going to get in there and a pothole's going to form. And I think we are seeing today the results of and we had to make that decision from a budget standpoint. And that's the important thing that I think most people that don't know a lot about the decisions we make at TDOT, we made that conscious decision based on budget, but it has impacts on the back end if you don't keep up with going in and putting structure in your pavement. So
do locals do the same thing? I mean, do locals do the same thing? Because
it varies.
Yeah.
It varies.
Because most of the big potholes that we see or I see here in my district are not on the state roads. They're on these back roads or these local roads. And I've always assumed that it's probably because they didn't invest enough money to make sure that the surface was properly prepared and water got in and yada, yada, yada.
Well, and a lot of those on those local roads, a lot of those pavements have been there for 20, 30 years. So
how long should a road last?
Well, I was going to say, depends. We'd love to our interstates, we'd like to have them on a 12-year cycle. So every 12 years, we're repaving those. Now, we've got 1,200 centerline miles of interstate in Tennessee. So if you consider that and start,
what does that mean? What is centerline? What does that mean?
So if you just measured the distance of the roadway along the center, we either use centerline miles or lane miles. So if you have multi-lanes, you would multiply it times the lanes. So over 1,200 centerline miles of interstate. When you look at a 12-year paving cycle for that, just on your interstates, you have to really watch the pennies to be able to make sure that you're putting enough money into the asphalt every year and keeping your good roads good. And that's what I say. Back in 2000, we decided we're gonna mill them and we're gonna cover over them, keep the water out, because that's all we could afford to do. Because everybody wants smooth pavements. Well, you take 2 years ago, we had a couple of bad winters in a row. Our pavements took a beating. I mean, you heard it. We talked about it in committee. One of the other things that puts stress on that is our snow and ice policy. When we're going in there and we put a lot of pressure on our pavements with snow and ice, clearing ice off, it deteriorates our pavement. So it's always a balancing act for us of, people want you to keep the snow off the road. You put too much pressure on your pavements during snow and ice, you tear them up.
Yeah.
Well, then you got to come back and resurface them sooner. So we have a whole division within TDOT, our asset management division, that looks at the financial impact of those decisions. So in other words, they'll say, Commissioner, if we put $50 million extra in pavements this year, we can get 3 more years life. And then we look at those trade-off decisions from a business standpoint of, okay, we're going to do that rather than spend additional money clearing more lanes during snow and ice. It's a constant business decision on how we spend that money to make those pavements last longer.
So when you're building a road, I assume this applies to bridges and other stuff as well, but TDOT really doesn't build roads, right? I mean, TDOT, we contract with third parties to do all the construction for us, right? We don't have like a building division.
We don't, but we have the ability to do that. In fact, our maintenance and operations staff in every region, we have 4 regions, can build some of our smaller projects. We have the ability to do that. We have, in fact, we have the best operators in the entire Southeast. We are back-to-back champions in the equipment rodeo. Anytime the 13 states we competed against sees Tennessee coming,
Well, of course, I would expect nothing less.
yes, they don't particularly like to compete against us.
Yeah.
But we do have some of the best operators. But no, we will build if we have one of the things y'all passed in the last budget. You expanded the spot safety program. Mm-hmm. Those small, quick hit projects, whether it's adding a turn lane, intersection. A lot of times we'll go out and build those ourselves.
Okay. Because a lot of the times I listen to the radio and they're complaining about, somebody's calling in appropriately complaining about this, that, or the other, and they're blaming TDOT. And it's really, TDOT's in charge, but it's really the contractor that's doing. And I got to tell you, and I know that it's an aggravation, but the big projects we've done around here the past few years, we did the one north of the old Jotty Bridge, then south of the old Jotty Bridge. Then we did the Broad Street, the exit off of 24 onto Broad Street. And then, of course, this big project that we just opened today. I have been really impressed with how the contractors have been able to keep at least the traffic moving. Now, there are moments in time where they're moving a big beam or something like that, that everything stops. But by and large, they've done a really good job about, traffic still backs up, but it's moving. I know a lot of that has to do with it. They're able to work at night now and do things at night. But I think that's a huge improvement that we've seen in road construction.
So one of the things, again, behind the curtain that goes into that from TDOT's standpoint is we spend a lot of time in the development process phasing the construction of those projects. It's oftentimes as challenging technically to figure out how to build those as it is to design the ultimate improvement. So how you phase traffic and keep connections so that commerce can keep moving, people can keep getting to their jobs. There's a lot of thought and planning that goes into that before the jobs ever hit the street. I think that's something a lot of people probably don't realize how much, we will phase bridge construction such that,
Well, you did that with this project that you just did. I mean, you did a portion of it, and everybody kind of thought, well, we're finished, right? Because you had the interchange done, and then all of a sudden you guys were back out there again, and they were like, well, what's going on here? Y'all, and that was a project that actually, I guess if we had run out of money, which of course we pay as we go, so we don't run out of money, but if we'd run out of money, that interchange still would have functioned.
Correct.
Even if we hadn't been able to continue the project.
Yeah, so a lot of that thinking of how you phase it and when you start and when you plan to finish different pieces is as intricate as the design itself.
Yeah. So you've got a chance here to kind of explain to people how much does it cost to maintenance a road per mile, and how much does it cost in today's world to build a new mile of new road?
So this is honestly,
because I don't think people know. I mean, people don't. They just think, well, let's go out and pave, right? And that can be, but it's really expensive.
So, and I remember, so I've been doing this 26 years now. Been in this industry, and I remember when I first came in, one of the former chief engineers at TDOT, a man named Bill Moore, who's one of my mentors actually. He used to estimate. This was back in the late 90s. He would estimate a road at $1 million a mile. And then I think it was probably, 10, 15 years ago, we had gotten up to $10 million a mile. I would submit to you now that we're upwards of $50 million.
Because the project we just completed is a $300 million
Yes.
project. Right?
Yes.
I mean, it's big money.
It's big dollars. We've seen exponential increases in construction cost
and
index.
Is that and I know it's a combination of things,
Yeah.
but is that materials? And of course, if the price of oil goes up,
Yep.
that affects the price of asphalt, yada, yada, yada. If India or China are doing a lot of road building, then it sucks international, global resources towards them. But there's also the technology, the new equipment. It's much more expensive. I mean, it increases efficiency, and
it's the labor market.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've seen fewer and fewer people going into the trades. I mean, I think that's one of the things that's so great about what the state of Tennessee has done with investments in TCATs and the Centers for Applied Technology is being able to provide opportunities for people that maybe college isn't the way they want to go, but can go into the trades. I mean, there's a real shortage of those people in the road building industry. So that's contributed to it as well.
But I think people would have a really hard time believing that it costs $50 million to build a mile of road.
Well, again, it depends on where you're talking about. If you're talking about a rural road in somewhere in Hamilton County.
Let's talk about your average state highway.
Yeah,
not an interstate, but your average state highway.
If I would say you're somewhere, and I know it's a wide range, but I'd say you're somewhere between $20 and $50 million a mile.
Yeah, that's just staggering, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you think about one of the things we look at is like when we price bridges. It wasn't, again, early in my career, you would estimate a bridge cost at $100 a square foot a deck. Okay. The bridge we're fixing to build in Memphis, the big I-55 bridge.
Largest project ever.
$2,500 a square foot of deck.
Yeah.
I mean, that.
Wow. I think let's just pause, man, let that resonate with you. 2,500, that's amazing, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. So let's talk about specific projects.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Sure.
Because I think at least here in Hamilton County, there's some that people are really particularly interested in. Probably the one, I just had a conversation this morning with our city mayor about this, and I said, I got the commissioner on my podcast today. I'm going to press him on this. The Wilcox Bridge project, which is now in my Senate district with redistricting, goes over the DeButts Rail.
32 tracks.
32 tracks. It's a. I don't know if you haven't driven across it.
I have.
Okay.
I don't remember many bridges that have a driveway off of them.
Yeah.
I think that might be the first one I've ever seen.
Yeah. Well, but if you go across the speed humps that they've put in there to keep the bridge together, if you're from out of town and you don't know they're there, you're either going for dental work the next morning because you've taken out 3 or 4 teeth, or you're taking your car in because the shocks are left on the side. They're left on the side of the road. And of course, some of the question about that bridge is, did we actually build that bridge, or did the railroad build that bridge? And nobody's really actually sure. But what's the challenge? That's a project, and it's getting, you just alluded to it, and this is one thing I talked to the mayor about this morning, is I think it's gone from like a $50 million project to a $100 million project because we've been delayed in getting it going.
Well, and we're also, it's actually, it's suffering the same fate of most of the bridge projects across the country right now. We're seeing that bridge, that project got a grant through the feds. Just first, let me start with that. It's actually a city project. The city got the grant, but we have stepped in to help the city manage that project. They, as good as they are, and they are very good at what they do, this is kind of a unique project for them. We're stepping in to help them manage this project, not only because we have more of the expertise with these bridges. We also have alternative delivery. Thanks to the General Assembly, we got expanded alternative delivery. We're going to actually use the CMGC delivery method to deliver that project. Whenever you have the railroad involved in a complex structure like that, these alternative methods where you can bring a contractor in, and Wright Brothers is a contractor. They've done a lot of work with us over the years. In that CMGC process, you work to manage the risk of a project like that. And anytime you have the railroad involved in a project, there is significant amount of risk with schedule. So we're going to deliver that project with that method, which we're excited about. We think it's going to give us a bit of a competitive edge, but it is complicated. It's an extremely complex bridge job.
I don't think the public, and I wouldn't either. I don't think the public kind of understands all that because they're like, it's a bridge. build a bridge next to it while you fix that bridge, and let's move on with the show. Right?
Okay, so let me give an example of why. So typically when we work with the railroads, if they own the right-of-way that the tracks are on, they will give us a working window. In other words, they will give us a time that we can actually work within a certain distance of their tracks. I was doing a project in Memphis a few years ago. We were replacing a railroad bridge that they owned. We were building them a new bridge. And they said, we'll give you 8 hours on Christmas Day. Okay, there's not much I can do on a bridge in 8 hours. So working through those contractual, they have a responsibility to keep trains moving on their track. They got deliveries to make. They got all those things. Working through that ability to get access to their right-of-way is a huge risk for us to get projects delivered quickly. So we have to work through all of that to make sure that we don't have a crane that's overhanging their right-of-way when they have a train coming through. That's one of the reasons it's complex. So we will actually devise ways to design a bridge around various parts of that. So that's why it takes long. They have interests. And we have interests, and we have to find a place where those align to be able to get the project delivered.
Yeah. So that's really important. The railroad, and I'm not disparaging the railroad, but they're just hard to work with because they are moving commerce and they have schedules to keep, and it's really important. And you have to work on their schedule. We saw that with the Appleton Pike project, right,
sure.
where we had the bridge, and everybody was like, when are y'all going to finish this project? Because y'all had the road and everything up to the bridge, and then on the other side you had the road, and here was this empty spot waiting for the bridge. So I think the public should kind of see, when they see that, it's hard for them to imagine that would be the biggest hangup, but it's a huge hangup.
Well, and look, we're human too. None of us like to sit in traffic and be inconvenienced. If we're trying to get to our kid's soccer game or we're trying to get to a doctor's appointment or whatever, we get that. And I'll be honest, our employees get it. We got 3,200 employees across the state, and most of them live in the communities that they serve. I can promise you, they hear about delays. Yeah. Oh, yeah. They hear about potholes. They hear about all the things that are really important to the everyday Tennessean, and we want nothing more than to be able to finish that project, get in, and get out as quickly as we can.
Yeah. Okay. Tell me about Hamilton Place. I had someone ask me, actually, here in the studio, one of the folks from the studio asked me, how is the new interchange at Hamilton Place, which is the mall area here that you guys have now moved up and are working on? How do those, it looks like you're building really long entrance and exit ramps. Is that what's being constructed there?
Yes, that is what's being constructed there, yes.
Yeah, and that's a huge project.
It is. It's, I can't remember the dollar figure. It's $83 to $85 million just on that project.
Yeah, there's just huge. The amount of money that goes into these are just staggering.
And it gets bigger every day. It to be honest, and we've talked about this in committee. You've been very focused on what the state, how the state spends its money, and we appreciate that, frankly. The size of these projects grows every year. It makes these decisions harder and harder when you're prioritizing where to put those dollars. We as engineers, we want to fix them all.
Yeah.
We really do.
Yeah. All right, next one. Everybody's going to ask about all the time, the I-59 coming in from the west side of Chattanooga, I-59 around the river.
Okay, yeah, well...
probably the bane of your existence.
Well,
now.
Honestly, I can't wait to build a solution to that project. If you consider as an engineer, we're trained to solve problems, right? So you got a railroad, you got a river, you got a mountain. There's not a whole lot of options where to expand the road. So, being able to...
And I'm assuming that a bridge is out of the question.
No, there's nothing out of the question. We're going to make a decision based on looking at all the factors, the ability to build whatever it is we have to build, the cost associated with that. I think there is the potential that a managed lane solution could be in the works in the future. There has to be a whole look at the revenue component of that. Can enough revenue come in to pay for that project? Can you go up? Can you go up with structure
Which
over
is
the
what
existing?
They've done in Georgia outside of Atlanta.
Exactly.
Right?
You've got some built-in challenges there, like I said, with railroad, river, and mountain, that you're going to have to come up with something in a very limited amount of real estate. I'm excited about. We've got a Pell study going on right now, which is
What's a Pell study?
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry, we're almost as bad as the military when it comes to
Yeah,
acronyms.
yeah.
We got one for everything. So that is it's planning and environmental linkage. Okay, so what we're trying to do is accelerate the normal planning process to get us ready for the environmental process. So let me back up a sec. So we spend a ton of time in developing environmental or doing environmental assessments on big projects like that. There's a ton of boxes we have to check for the federal aid program to be able to get an environmental document to build a project. This planning environmental leakage process, which is relatively new for the feds, there's only a few states that are doing this, is really an effort to expedite that, do the planning and some of the early engineering concurrently, such that the environmental process doesn't take as long. So one of the parts of that is, and what your listeners probably don't care about any of that. What they'll care about is the fact that you look at alternatives for the problem that you're talking about, whether it's managed lanes, a conventional solution, just widening. Do you widen out over the river? Do you look at moving a railroad? Probably not. But you look at all those alternatives, and you look at a funding plan for how you're going to phase and fund all those improvements. So then that informs our decisions on the 10-year plan that we develop.
Someone asked me about this project this morning, actually at a breakfast I was at. And I said, well, and I gave him the same thing. I said, you got a mountain, you got a railroad, you got a river. And I said, you can move the mountain and the river before you would be able to move the railroad.
There's some truth to that.
I think that's pretty. Unless you're willing to pay it and move it for them, but otherwise, they don't like to move. And again, you highlighted something that, again, I see it on paper all the time, and most of the folks who are just interested in having good roads and bridges. Mm-hmm. Is y'all do break these things up into phases. Like you'll provide to us an estimate on the timeline for the engineering,
right,
and then the environmental, and then when it goes under contract, mm-hmm. and when it actually the construction starts, and when we expect it to be finished. So you do have to phase these things out. But it is interesting to hear you talking about, well, if we can merge those kind of columns together, it helps speed the process up. But the environmental is a huge thing. You will remember that the 840 loop around Nashville was delayed because two agencies of state government were fighting with each other, Department of Environment,
yes,
and the Department of Transportation, suing each other over the environmental limitations to the
Something
project.
that might surprise your listeners is you talked about those phases that we always talk about: preliminary engineering, the environmental, and the right of way, and then construction. We are more successful at predicting the amount of construction time. There's less risk in that than the two phases before.
Yeah,
the engineering and the environmental phase, and the right of way phase, it's harder to predict that. When you talk about what takes so long to get projects on the street, it's those two phases. And I don't think most people realize all that's going on in the background. I mean, what we all care about is what we see, right? When a shovel goes in the ground, when's it going to be done? There's likely years of work that has gone on prior to that. One of the jobs, 55 Crump, it's right adjacent to the new 55 bridge in Memphis. That project was on the books for almost 30 years before it went to construction. It only took us 3.5 years to build it, but it was in development for 30 years prior to getting to the construction phase.
Well, you would say that we are almost in that kind of process with the discussion about a bridge in the northern part of Hamilton County up between, that would connect potentially Soddy Daisy to Ottawa. Of course, the widest part of the bridge, widest part of the river, with lots of different topographical challenges, not to mention a nuclear plant hanging out nearby. Yeah. I mean, all kind of challenges in terms of, but yeah, a lot of these projects are years into the distance. So with that in mind, when citizens are concerned about, like, for example, there's a road, Rossville Boulevard, which I believe is a state road, Tennessee state road, but I think it merges into a Georgia state road.
Yep.
When citizens are concerned about a particular road that seems to have deteriorated faster than maybe some road projects that are ahead of it in your queue, how does TDOT decide, hey, you know what, we need to move this thing up because this road, we thought it was going to last 12 years using your numbers. it's deteriorating a lot faster than we thought it would. We need to go ahead and we're going to have to bump this project and move this one down.
Happens all the time. We are constantly, our district staff throughout the state are constantly riding their routes to look at condition. We profile all of our roads. We have a lot of high-tech equipment that we use to measure rutting, cracking, all of those different things. And we assign a value, a pavement quality index value, to every single segment of state route and interstate we have across the state. In fact, you can go back, and we have some records there in Nashville where all this used to be handwritten. We can go back to the 40s and 50s in some cases to see when roads were treated with whatever they were, however it was decided to repair them. So we look at all of those on a cycle. It is not uncommon that what you just described happens where a section deteriorates quicker than another, and it has to be moved ahead. We have a 3-year paving plan that we advertise every year. That changes based on how roads may deteriorate quicker. You may have had an issue with the liquid asphalt that went into the mix that was put down on that road where it didn't last as long. So we may have to go in and fix it quicker. You may have an underlying base issue that you didn't know about when you did a mill and fill, and it has to be moved. So we try to be dynamic with that, and we put a lot. Something else folks probably don't know about TDOT. We have our own materials and test division. Materials and test, they look at every single product that goes into our pavements, our bridges, everything that we do, whether it's certifying the type of steel that goes in it, the asphalt, the types of aggregate, all the binders we use, all of that stuff. We have a group of really smart people in materials and tests that test every single one of those and are consistently looking for what is the best way to solve this particular issue. A pavement design here in Hamilton County is very different from a pavement design in Obion County in West Tennessee. The aggregates are very different. If you take a pavement condition map of all the state routes in Tennessee and overlay it on a geologic map of the state of Tennessee, you will see a direct correlation to how long our pavements last.
That's really interesting because, I don't think people think about, once somebody says it, it's one of those things you go, well, okay, of course, that the land in West Tennessee is markedly different than the land in East Tennessee. And so the type of road substance that you put down in West Tennessee is going to be different than, and also we don't take into account, that the earth moves, weather conditions, all those things that kind of impact upon us. But relative to the Wilcox Bridge, which really is it's just a central focus of our community right now. What can we tell folks about the progress of that? When we can expect to see something happening, if ever? I don't want to pin you down, but I do think people kind of want to know: is there a timeline on this, or is it going to go to being $100 million project to being a $150 million project because we're just not doing anything?
No. So what's going on right now is actually. And
the bridge is safe to travel on, right?
If a bridge is open in Tennessee, it's safe. Now, it may be posted for a certain load limit, and there's a whole process behind that, which we can get into if you want to, but if a bridge is open in Tennessee, it is safe. What is going on right now with Wilcox, and we were actually just talking about this, my team and I, at lunch, is we're going through I'll call it a discussion with our partners at the Federal Highway Administration about doing an early works package.
Which is another thing people don't think about, is that when we build some of these projects, we're having to coordinate not just with folks like the railroad or local government, but we're also having to, in some instances, we're having to collaborate with our federal partners because they got rules and regulations that they make us adhere to.
Absolutely. 50% of our funding comes from the feds, so we are subject to the Code of Federal Regulations when it comes to spending those dollars. So right now, one of the things we're looking at doing is some early works packages. So doing some work early. I talked earlier about doing a lot of activities concurrently. That's a big shift we've made at TDOT with not doing everything in such a linear fashion. So as I mentioned, that project is being delivered with what's called the CMGC method. That's Construction Manager General Contractor. What that means is typically projects most people know about that Tennessee does, they're called hard bid or design bid build. What that means is we design a set of drawings, contractors come in and bid on them, low bid wins. Okay? In CMGC, we hire what's called a CM, which is usually a contractor, and we say, okay, we've got a 10% design here. We want you, Mr. Contractor, to come in here and look at our concept and see how you could build this the most efficient way possible, and let's talk about how we manage the risk in it. And we negotiate the scope of that job and negotiate a guaranteed maximum price before we actually build it. So that is, if the public doesn't see anything going on with Wilcox right now, one of the reasons is we are at a table with the CM in this case, trying to come up with what is the most economic, safe, efficient way to build that project. And one of the things we're looking at is what are some of the things we can do early? Because again, we got 32 railroad tracks. We got 3 different railroads we're coordinating with. So it's really back to those comments I made earlier about the work that goes into figuring out how you're going to build the solution. When we get to that point, the project's going to go pretty quick.
Yeah. And I think on the Wilcox, I think it's important for us to make it clear that this is actually a local government project.
Yeah.
The state is just assumed a responsibility because we have expertise in doing this.
We've agreed to help, and we do that a lot. Look, the city of Chattanooga is great to work with. We're very fortunate across the state. We have a lot of good municipalities to work with, but this was something that we were very appreciative. They went out, they got this grant, asked for our help to do it. We're happy to do it. I think it's going to be, I know I'm going to say this, and somebody listening is going to say, well, yeah, when are you going to start building it? I can tell you that this project is going to be a success. We've got a lot of team members that are experienced with this method of delivering projects. We got a really good contractor who knows how to build bridges and work with the railroad. But there's a lot of work that goes on in the front end to get to that point.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about roads and bridges because I guess that's most of what TDOT is known for.
Mm-hmm.
But you do other stuff too. We have a ever-growing population in this state. Obviously, we're trying to develop a road system that can address that growing population, and we're looking at alternative types of transportation and all those kind of things. But one of the things that's a result of our population growth is the growth and development of, like here locally, our regional airport.
Yeah.
And TDOT plays a role in that. So for folks who don't know that TDOT has anything to do with airports, tell folks how TDOT interfaces with the airports around the state.
Well, we have an aeronautics division. So I don't know if people realize we've got 70 general aviation airports that we look over from a state standpoint. We also have the large 4 large urban
commercial airports,
5 commercial airports, and maybe one more coming online. Jackson is looking at coming online. So there is funding that comes through the FAA. So the state, when it comes to dealing with the federal agencies from a transportation standpoint, whether it's aviation, transit, or highways, the state is the conduit for those federal dollars. So we have an aviation division at TDOT that if dollars come in from the FAA, they help administer. We're the steward of those dollars that come through the federal program. Same with transit. We do the same thing. We serve 28 transit systems.
Transit being buses.
Yeah, it could
rail.
It could be rural. It could be park and rides. It could be van pool programs to rural counties. So as well as the large urban things that most people associate with transit. Not only that, I don't know if most people realize we operate 2 ferries. TDOT. We
used to have one here.
Yeah.
Then y'all built a bridge and it went out of business.
So we've got 2 ferries left, both on the Cumberland River. So we've got a pretty wide array of things we do besides just the roads and bridges. Our help program, the yellow trucks you see out on the interstate, particularly in the urban areas. We just supplemented that thanks to to y'all passing the budget last year that funded our rural service patrol, which we're really excited about. That's going to be basically Help Light, which is going to be a smaller vehicle, but we're going to have that same help service, whether it's roadside assistant, incident management, on all of our rural interstates throughout the state. In the first 2 days of that, we actually launched it here in Region 2. First 2 days, we had rural help out there, 110 incidents.
Yeah. No, I think that's one of those customer service, customer value kind of things that started, I guess I was in my first couple of years in the legislature when Bredesen, I believe, introduced that to us. Other states had kind of been playing with it, and I think Bredesen introduced that, and it just kind of has become.
It's been one of our most popular programs. And that's an
expectation, right?
Yeah, it is. But you think about it, there is the customer service aspect of it, but I think maybe something folks don't necessarily realize is the safety benefit.
Yeah.
If you can get a vehicle that's stalled on the road off the road, you protect that person that's in that vehicle and potentially prevent a secondary crash. That's huge. And also from a congestion standpoint, the quicker you can get a wreck cleared, quicker you can get people moving again. And that HELP program plays a vital role in being able to do that.
Going back to the airports, I don't think people realize how much the state invests in our commercial airports. Matter of fact, like at the regional airport here, local government every now and then will put some money in. So we call it the Chattanooga Metropolitan Airport. But really, between the states and the feds, that's 99%. I mean,
That's right.
99% of the budget that they have comes from the state and feds. And so the state has really a real important interest in our commercial airports and our general aviation, which is growing, as you're experiencing, I'm sure, going in leaps and bounds.
Oh, absolutely. Well, to be honest, we're very blessed. The entire state's growing, whether it's the aviation sector or the surface transportation. We've seen unprecedented growth, and our transportation system is.
But how do you keep up? Right? I mean, that's what the citizens would say is, well, gosh, okay, that's all well and good, but how do we keep up?
Well, I mean, the reality is we have, as you know, you and I have talked about, and you've questioned me about in committee. We have a funding gap with the need that's out there, however you define it, and that can be debated in a lot of different ways, and should be. That's a healthy debate to have. But the reality is the gap is still there, and it's significant. We're growing so fast, we're outpacing the ability of our infrastructure to keep up. And I will say we're not unlike many other states, particularly in the southeast part of the country. The states we're competing with, the Texas of the world, the Floridas, the North Carolinas, they're experiencing the same thing. The federal gas tax was last changed in 1993. It's 18.4 cents, wasn't indexed to inflation. How much does a loaf of bread cost now compared to what it cost then? I mean, we're all dealing with those inflationary pressures, and it continues to put stress on how far those dollars go. So it makes it really critical that we make good data-driven decisions about where we do spend that money. But one of our guiding principles in Tennessee is we're going to take care of what we got first. We're not going to put in a swimming pool if we need a new roof on our house. Mm-hmm. So we're going to take care of what we got. It's gotten us a long way. The fact that we have good roads and good infrastructure in Tennessee, can we do better? Always. We can always do better. The fact that we have it, I believe, is a huge driver of the economic success of the state.
Yeah. And we don't go into debt on our roads.
Yeah.
We pay for them as we have the resources to do them, which means we may move a little slower in another state, which will go into debt. And often, like states like Florida and Texas, who have a tremendous amount of road debt, they spend a lot of their transportation dollars just servicing the debt that they
which we don't have to do. You're right. We don't have to worry about that. So that's a plus.
So tell me, as we kind of wind down here, you've talked a lot about planning, and obviously engineers like to plan things, so I get that.
Yeah.
From just an efficiency perspective, the TDOT puts together 3 and 10-year plans of projects that they want to and plan to be doing. Now, of course, you've already mentioned those can shift depending on need and change in circumstance stuff. You just recently published your
10-year plan.
10-year plan. What's the general synopsis of your 10-year plan?
Well, first off, it's fiscally constrained. So what it looks at is every dollar that we either have or is coming to us in future years via the state gas tax and federal gas tax. So what you see there is a menu.
And this is posted on your website.
That's right.
Anybody
it's posted on
can
the
go see
website.
it.
Yep. If people ask me all the time, when are you going to do this? I said it's right there on the 10-year plan. We're being very open and transparent about this is how we plan to spend your money, the taxpayers' money, on the things that we've identified as the priorities. Now, is it everything? No. In fact, when we talk about priorities, we look at several different things. Obviously, safety, congestion relief. I mean, all of these things that you would think go into those decisions are what ultimately builds that 10-year plan. Another thing we look at is corridor completers. If we've spent a bunch of dollars in buying right-of-way for a certain corridor, we've already made that investment. We want to make good on that and complete that corridor. So when we put all that into this program or this algorithm that we've developed, and it spits out a ranking for every project we have across the state. So let me give you an example. If folks say, well, I just don't want to sit in traffic. If congestion was the single data point that you used, you'd build every project in Davidson County. Obviously, we're not going to do it. We can't do that. We wouldn't do that. There's needs all across. So there is a bit of art that comes into that with looking at, well, all the different regions in Tennessee have their own sort of problems, and urban problems are not the same necessarily as rural. When you think about rural, it's usually about connectivity to an interstate. Urban, it's about congestion. Safety is a blanket criteria that you look everywhere. So all of those things are looked at when it comes to how we prioritize what goes into that 10-year plan. But those projects that I'm talking about, that's after we've said we need to put this much money into asphalt and this much money into bridges to protect the stuff we've got. And whatever's left, that's what we use to build new capacity projects.
Yeah, when you talked about congestion, you just made me think of something that I really want to give you a moment to comment on. Just yesterday, the WRCB Channel 3 here did a poll or reported on that a new study came out that in the top 100 most congested intersections, Chattanooga has 2 of them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming they're both either I-24-75 or I-24-124, right?
Yeah, it was the bottlenecks report.
Yeah, the bottlenecks report. So you're familiar with it.
Yeah, so we do our own, and I don't know if people know, we do our own bottleneck report internally at TDOT. We track all those areas that are those bottlenecks or trouble spots within Tennessee, and we try to align our investments with a 10-year plan with those bottlenecks.
Yeah, and so the project that we just completed, I-75-24, should this project remove that from the bottleneck top 100 list?
Well, it certainly should, if you ask me.
I mean, there's a point we've talked about this, or y'all have talked to, because legislators, we're not in the. I mean, there are some legislators and engineers, but most of us are not. And I've often heard traffic engineers talk about the solution to congestion isn't necessarily building more lanes. It can help, but it's not a solution, because if it was, then Atlanta, New York, L.A. have got dozens of lanes. People would just flow through it, and we don't. There are challenges to congestion that are beyond just the number of lanes that you have. Like for us, going up a hill, winding around the city, all those things contribute to the congestion, particularly around commercial transportation trucks.
Yeah, so let me give you one that folks again may not think about as much, that we don't control. That's land use. Land use planning and development is a local issue that TDOT really doesn't play a role in. But if areas get developed in a certain way with a certain level of density, that's going to generate an amount of traffic that our system has to then deal with. That's something that's very hard to predict. So that's when you hear traffic engineers talk about, it's not always just building additional lanes. That's one of the things they're referring to, is the fact that we don't necessarily control the way areas get developed. One of the other things is, some people want different ways to travel. We have to come up with scalable solutions, whether that's, in dense urban cores, more people want to be able to walk and bike. We've seen that across the state. That's not necessarily what's really important to somebody in Meigs County. So we got to have scalable solutions for all that. One of the things that we can do and are looking at is technology. How do we maximize, just take some of our urban areas, maximize signal timing or coordinated signal systems, such as you can move more cars through the same real estate footprint than you did yesterday by the use of technology. That's a big, big topic in our world right now, is how you do that. Of course, autonomous vehicles. How are those gonna change the way we move? So there's a lot of those things that we try to do to maximize throughput without having to buy additional property or build additional lanes. At the end of the day, the tried and true way is to build additional capacity.
Yeah. So before we close here, I do want to give a shout out to TDOT, because nationally our road system ranks pretty high amongst the commercial world, despite, I mean, obviously we've got our warts, but even with all the congestion, all that kind of stuff, our road system and the condition of our roads always ranks high amongst the commercial.
Yeah, we're consistently in the top 10 CNBC rankings of the condition of our roads.
Who's like number one most of the time? Is it one
well,
of the states where nobody's ever on the road, like Utah or something like that?
I don't know if he's going to listen to this podcast, but my good friend Chris Peoples, who's the COO of North Carolina, likes to remind me that North Carolina is consistently ranked number one in some areas. And
interesting.
I remind him every year.
We used to be North Carolina, Tennessee used to be North Carolina.
Well, I remind him every year that we got the best operators after we beat them at the rodeo competition.
There you go.
But we've got a pretty close bond. But we try to look at we try to borrow from other DOTs all the time. What's the best practice out there?
Yeah. Well, you have a big job. You have a job, and I do believe when we started, you talked about how people measure. I think people use two kind of measurements of how well their state government is doing. One is how long am I having to wait at the DMV to get my driver's license, and the second is how good are the roads that I'm driving on. I think those two, because they're like the weather. I really believe they're like the weather. People will talk about how they had to wait for their driver's license, or they'll talk about the road they're driving on in the same vein every day they talk about the weather. So TDOT has a really important public-facing role for the state of Tennessee, not only for the commercial side of it, meaning the movement of commerce, which is so important to our state, but also for the people who come to visit our state. Yeah. People come to visit our state, they drive on our good interstate system, they drive on our good state highway system, and they go, these people must know how to do things. I might move here. So I want to thank you for the work you guys are doing. I know it's in many instances thankless, and since most people don't see behind the scenes and all the work that goes into a road, they only see the pothole that developed on them. I don't think they often appreciate the great work that you guys are doing. And Tennessee's got a great transportation system that has no road debt to it, so that the citizens are not having to pay for debt. They're just paying for what they're getting. This has been Tennessee State Senator Bo Watson with another episode of Tennessee Today. It's been a great discussion with Will Reid, who's the commissioner of the Tennessee Department of Transportation. If you enjoyed today's show, I hope you will click the like button or the subscribe button, depending upon the service that you're using. It helps us get the show out to more people, and I hope you'll share it with folks, because I think talking about transportation, talking about roads, bridges, railroads, airports are all important conversations for people all across the state. We'll see you next time.